Sunil Murlidhar Shastri is a consultant, educator, and speaker in ocean and environmental governance. Throughout his career, he has worked in numerous roles, including as a university academic, ocean and environmental policy consultant and researcher, and roles in mining and ocean engineering. Since 1982, he has made it his mission to protect ocean life and has worked ever since to inspire and guide others on how we can achieve Pacem in Maribus, or peace in the ocean.
I'm a consultant, educator, and speaker in ocean and environmental governance, and that's what I have done for most of my life. I have to also take this opportunity. I want to delve straight into the topic, which is water, a global view. I'm just going to take a broad perspective, a broad overview of water and the challenges that we are facing in the area of water resource management. I'm just going to start by saying water is a finite and fragile resource. And the total amount of water we have is, 1,400 million cubic kilometers, and 2.5% of that is water. Most of the fresh water, though, as we know, is in the form of permanent ice in the Greenland or in Antarctica, and in frozen condition, and also deep water aquifers in many places which are not accessible. So only really speaking, only about 200,000 cubic kilometers of this is usable. Less than 1% of all fresh water, or 0.01% of all water, is what we call as usable or potable water. Now, this doesn't make any sense if you're looking at these figures, but I had this opportunity to go to the Netherlands Water Museum many years ago, about 2 decades ago, and we visited a place called Arnhem. Arnhem is very famous, as you probably know, for the movie A Bridge Too Far, a war movie based on a book written by Cornelius Ryan and directed by Richard Attenborough, and of the Gandhi fame, of course. This museum is very near that place. We had gone there on my Rotary trip. I was the president of my Rotary Club at that time. So we had gone to our sister club in Alton Beach, and we visited this museum. So now that place gave a semblance or a sense of what the water quantity is. So there was a bath full of water, and on top of the bath, there was this one teaspoon full of water. And that 1 teaspoon of water signifies all the fresh water that we have, all the water that human beings can use for whatever purposes, for industrial, agricultural, domestic, and so on, and for our own survival. So this reminded me, as an ocean person, the famous poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who talks of, in his poem, the rhyme of ancient mariner, where he says, water, water, everywhere, not a drop to drink. And that's what it is. So there is lots of water around us, lots of water where we are. In fact, 70% of the earth is covered with a sea. And in fact, 99% of the biosphere is the ocean. But then the amount of water that we really have is extremely limited. And that's what I want to first of all bring about. I want to talk about, again, this graph that shows precipitation, evaporation, and runoffs by regions. So you can see here various regions there, and you have Europe having such small quantity of water, but obviously looks like they are managing their water more efficiently, despite all the tirade that we have in the UK press about all the water companies, etc. But they seem to be managing their water quite efficiently. But if you see in Asia and Africa and South America, there's lots of water, but then there are severe water shortages, which we'll come back to later. Antarctica is the driest continent, contrary to whatever belief you might have. Of course, it's not inhabited really, but other than that, Australia is supposed to be the driest continent. And then, of course, you have runoff and groundwater recharge. So almost 45,000 cubic kilometers of all the fresh water that we have. It runs off the ground, or it recharges our rivers, and goes into the sea eventually. So 50% of all runoffs occur in Asia and South America. In fact, if you see, a major fraction of runoffs occur as a result of one major river. Amazon carries 6,000 cubic kilometers. So almost 1/7 or 1/8 of all the runoff that you have from the earth comes from one single river, the Amazon. So how powerful that is. And there are consequences, or there are connotations to that, but which we won't go to. But they are into building of continental shelf, and also scouring, in fact, the earth into the ocean and creating sedimentary rock formations there. But that's a different story. Now, where the water stress would be the highest, and this has been a constant map without much change, so there's plenty of water where the low water stress, the dark blue things on the map, that's where there's more than enough water to sustain. But if you go, as you go darker into light blue, and then you go into red and yellow, and then finally black, the black is where the water resilience or water availability is extremely limited. In fact, not too long ago on the World Water Day in the month of March, 22nd of March, the World Resources Institute produced their latest report, and they said that there are 16 countries around the world, which are mostly denoted here in black, that are water scarce. And India, where I spend half my time, I split my year, by the way, for the last 10 years, so since about 2015, I have been splitting my time between India and the UK. So currently I am in India, based in India. I tell people that I work from my wife's dining table or my mother's dining table. So now I am on my mother's dining table. That's where I work from when I'm not working from my wife's dining table. So there are 16 countries that are water scarce, and India is 13th on that list. But Indian population is 1.4 billion, so that's much more than the population of all the other 15 countries combined. So the water pressure, or the water scarcity, or water stress in India is quite significant, and in fact something to be worried about. Water demand and supply. The demand factors, of course, very obvious. The population growth. I mean, India is the most populous country in the world now. Demand factors: population growth, industrial growth, and irrigated agriculture. Of course, again, to feed the increasing population, industrial growth to produce all the stuff that we need for our burgeoning population around the world. And of course, not just the need, but the greed. So the Mahatma used to say famously that there is enough in the world for the need of everybody, but not enough in the world for the greed of anybody. So now the problem is every one of us is greedy. So obviously we need more and more water because there's greater population, there's greater industrial needs, there's greater irrigated agriculture, and so on. And then supply side, of course, we have the damming, and I put in word damming as in damming. You dam something, you make it, you curse something. So there's both the damming and the damming of rivers. 140 of the 230 largest rivers have been dammed, creating huge dams and displacing up to 100 million people around the world, or maybe more. And this is happening all the time. I'll come back to that in a minute. Irreversible changes in ecosystem they cause. Because if you stop a dam, the flow of the river stops, and the stuff that the river carries into the sea, that stops. The biogeochemical fluxes, as we call them, the biogeochemical fluxes that go from land to the sea, and vice versa, of course, through evaporation, rains, and precipitation, etc., they all cause a problem. So irrigated agriculture, of course, 70% of fresh water abstracted is used for irrigated agriculture. So that's our major consumer. So if anything that you can do in reducing, and I think the next talk that we are going to hear is about hydroponic, where a lot of this water is saved, and you can create lots of fruit and veg and all those kind of things through much reduced use of water. Accounts for 40% of global food production. So there is still the 60% that needs other type of water, which is mostly rainwater and so on. Irrigated land has increased from 200 million hectares to 350 million hectares in the last 40 years, and it will keep on increasing, obviously. Of course, the efficiency is also going up. So that's one positive thing. Water abstraction, that is getting water from rivers, from lakes, from shallow aquifers, as we can say, has gone up from 2,500 to 4,000 cubic kilometers. Salination has affected 80 million hectares and increasing at 2 million hectares. So this is another problem. We have desertification happening because of dry land, and then dry land converts itself into a desert. But that's again changing also. There are positive things. There's something called the Great Green Wall, and Munir might probably have heard about it. This runs from Djibouti to Dakar. So Dakar in the west and Djibouti in the east. And this is a great green wall they're creating, and they're actually planting trees in the desert. And then because the trees are there, now water is returning there. So more trees can be planted and more trees can be can bring in more water. So this is a virtuous circle. We always talk of vicious circles, but this is a virtuous circle. So 2 billion people lack access to safe drinking water, and 3 billion people lack access to improved sanitation. These affects Asia and Africa in the main. This results in cumulative deaths of 5 million people because of the diseases that are spread because of contaminated water. And of course, this also compares deaths due to air pollution. So air pollution and water pollution are our two greatest enemies. So we want to go from lawless to lawful. I always say this because our land is suffering badly because we are using it too much and not taking out all the nutrients. So our land is becoming, see, the nitrogen balance, as it's called, is getting disrupted. The air is polluted, and the water is polluted. So I don't have to go into the details of why air and water is polluted or how. So that's what I call law: land, air, and water. So we are in a lawless society now. The whole world is a lawless society in my eyes, and we want to change that to become a lawful society. We want to make our land better, our water better, our air better, our water better. So then we came to with this idea of water policy. Before I got into this, when I graduated, the year I graduated in 1977, there was this conference in Argentina called Mar del Plata. This is River Plate Conference, which is the first conference held by the United Nations about water problem, water issues. So we're not talking, so for 50 years, we've been talking about water problems and doing a little bit about it. International Drinking Water Supply and Sanitation Decade happened 4 years later. This is about the time when I started working in ocean and environmental governance, and reaffirmation in 1992 at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, the famous Rio Conference. And of course, World Water Council was set up. It claims success in halting the decline. So it's not stopping the decline, but it's at least halting the decline, and maybe actually improving the situation of water and sanitation and water policy in general. So it was recognized at Mar del Plata that water quality is very important. Quantity is also very important. We need water. We need X amount of water for every human being. But the quality of water, whether that water is drinkable, whether that water can be used for our industrial, agricultural, domestic purposes. So realization that water quality is critical as water availability. So sources of pollution, of course, untreated sewage, chemical discharge, phosphates, fertilizers, and chemicals that we keep putting into the agriculture. Chemical discharges, petroleum leaks, spills, old mine workings, pits, agriculture runoffs, etc., etc. 50% of the world's major rivers are seriously depleted and polluting. But things are reversing. I mean, when I first went to England, River Thames was very bad. In fact, before that, it was even worse in the 50s and 60s. But today, if you go, River Thames is good, it's thriving with life, and it's much cleaner than it ever used to be in the last 500 years, 500 years, at least since the Industrial Revolution. So monitoring of water quality programs for major international river basins. So there are some major international river basins such as the Danube, the river, the Rhine, the Mekong, the River Plate, of course, I mentioned, and Nile, etc. The United Nations Environment Program has something called the Global Environment Monitoring System, GEMS, and through which the water program is implemented. And of course, people talk in terms of, why give water for free? And can water privatization be a panacea for both water and water supply and water quality? So if we can regulate the water supply, can it make a difference? And it does. In the UK, most our houses are metered. So obviously, you pay money based on how much water you use, and people then become appreciate the fact that when their water bill comes and they see huge water bills, then they stop washing their cars unnecessarily or watering their lawns if it is not really essential. So it's very important. But I'm not saying that that's a solution, because there are many parts of the world where people can't afford to eat and you cannot start charging for water. So groundwater, 2 billion people depend on groundwater. 20% of groundwater, 20% of global water comes from deep water aquifers, 600 to 700 cubic kilometers. Much of it comes from shallow aquifers, drop in water table in many countries. So these are not necessarily, I'm not saying these are the countries where the water scarcity is, because former Soviet Union has plenty of water. But all these countries are are experiencing, including India, for example, which has a lot of water scarcity, worse water scarcity. They all have a drop in water table. So what happens then when you have a drop in water table? Then the salt water incursion, or what we call a salt water intrusion, starts due to excess abstraction of fresh water, and intrusions up to 10 kilometers inland in a city in Chennai, which is the fourth largest metropolitan city in India, has been experienced for the last couple of decades. So the water there tastes murky, at the time municipal or tap water. Transboundary water management, some 261 rivers, these are called transboundary rivers. That means they go from one country to another. And they straddle two or more nations. So these are called international water courses. Water has become a weapon of dispute, of course. It's caused many wars and conflicts. In fact, the recent India-Pakistan conflict can be at least partly attributed to the fact that India stopped the water from the 5 rivers that was going into Punjab. And water allocation issues are a major issue in international law. So water allocation, the International Law Commission has got a water convention, the Helsinki Convention for Water, and they have various formulae to work how to share the water in a more equitable manner. So there's territorial sovereignty, territorial integrity, equitable distribution, and common management, which are the 4 principles of water allocation, starting from the first one, which is the weakest, and the last one, which is the strongest, common management. And there is a move to make as many common management have these common management practices as we have seen through the river basins, also for other areas, so that these international network of basin organizations, river basins organizations, can work in a positive way to protect water resources and also share them more equitably. So this is a list of all the international rivers that go from one country to another, or more than 2 countries. So Europe has 71, Asia has 53, South America has 38, North and Central America has got 39, and Africa has got 60. So these are the list of international waterways. Water development projects and ecosystem impact. So you have to have elimination of marshes and wetlands. 50% of marshes and wetlands have been lost in the 20th century. 84% of Ramsar sites, this is where the wetland sites are protected by this convention, and that those sites are threatened. Removing water for other uses through these 350 dams of 60-meter higher are coming up. As we speak, more dams are being built. 60 meters is considered to be a large dam. So there's an international commission on large dams. So that looks after the construction of large dams and how it can be regulated. Altering the direction and volumes of flow. There are hardly any natural rivers. In the Victorian times, the UK, the British, in their immense wisdom, decided to have narrow and deep and straight rivers. Of course, it was good in the Industrial Revolution because you had to take coal from A to B and take the finished product from B to elsewhere. And all that could be done more efficiently if the rivers were straight, if they're narrow, and if they're deep. And so the narrow boats came, which are now used for leisure and for residential purposes. But that's what the purpose of making the rivers not natural. The river by nature meanders, goes like a snake, but there are hardly any natural rivers, at least in the Western world. And of course, any world actually, because we're taking away the quantity of water, huge quantities of water from them by damming them, by pumping them, and so on. Abstraction, as it is called. And of course, contamination of water, pollution. So opportunities to reduce water consumption exist through use of existing technologies such as drip irrigation, low flow toilets, other BATNIC. BATNIC is a typically British phrase. It's called best available technique, not entailing excessive costs. So obviously there is cost come into picture. So they always talk in terms of techno-economically feasible solutions. So it's got to be technologically feasible, but it's also got to be economically feasible. You should be able to afford it. So you should have the technology to do it, and your economy should be able to sustain such technologies. Changing the irrigation technology. So simple thing like, watering your fields, not using these sprays, but using drip irrigation, or simple thing like not watering your fields, agricultural fields during the daytime when the sun is shining, because then half the water just gets evaporated. In fact, when you have a sprinkler irrigation, half the water is evaporated even before it reaches the soil or the plants or the trees. So that is important. Stopping wasteful leaks. I live in India, and you won't believe this. Now it's rainy season, but even if it is not the rainy season, you go on any road or you go out into the city or places, and you will see at least one or two roads where water is flowing because there's some leakage somewhere and nobody's bothered to repair it. Irrigation during the day, using potable water for irrigation. So again, the other thing is potable water is a scarce commodity. So why do we use it for flushing the toilets and washing your cars and irrigating your fields? So again, that's something we have to think about. Can municipalities have two separate taps, one for not so clean water and one for clean water that is for drinking and cooking purposes? And of course, water pricing, like I said, make water private and then price it appropriately. But again, that's not a solution everywhere. Policies and institutions. World Hydrological Cycle Observation System, WICOS. There is a World Earth Observation System. So similarly, there's a World Hydrological Cycle Observation System. World Water Forum since 1997, held every 3 years. The latest was in Bali in 2024. Swedish International Water Institute, annual Swedish Water Symposium, and Stockholm Water Prize. The Stockholm Water Prize is like the Nobel Prize in water, and it's actually done in exactly the same ceremony in Stockholm. In fact, I have attended a few of those because some friends of mine got it. 5 Indians have got the Stockholm Water Prize. And of course, there's something called the Global Water Partnership, and there's a Global International Water Assessment. So basically, I'm talking about policy trends which are recognizing social economic value of water, emphasis on efficient allocation of water, promotion of basin management and approach, involvement of stakeholders, you and me, all of us, and measurement of quality, and of course, monitoring of standards. I have got finally some of these few thoughts, but there'll be question and answers. Somebody said that best question will get a prize. I hope the best answer also gets a prize because there's nothing like a bad question. There's only bad answers. Anyways, thank you very much. I will leave you to it. Thank you very much.